Hello everyone and welcome to Religion Reconsidered. My name is Jack Fernan, and firstly, to address the clickbait straight off the bat, no, the Catholic Church has not changed their position on same-sex marriage or same-sex relationships. If you've been looking at the news over the past day or so, you might be forgiven for thinking so. The New York Times came out yesterday saying Pope Francis allows priests to bless same-sex couples in their headline. Meanwhile, over at Reuters, the headline was Vatican approves blessings for same-sex couples in landmark ruling. So I thought we might just have a little bit of a look into this declaration that the Church has come out with and what it actually means. So yesterday, Cardinal Victor Manuel Fernandez, who's the head of the Vatican's Dicastery for the Doctrine of Faith, published a declaration with the support of Pope Francis called Fiducia Supplicans and the subtitle of On the Pastoral Meaning of Blessings. And as a result, there's been a fair bit of noise that's been generated. Twitter has been blowing up with people on both sides saying how important it is. There's been people calling for schisms. There's been people calling Pope Francis the Antichrist. And so I thought, we would have a bit of a look at just what the document is saying. People are also saying that the declaration is unclear. I think one of the things that's important to keep in mind is that these declarations are written in quite often a legalistic manner. They are written like judgments from a court. So there's very often an introduction, there is problems posed, there is evidence presented, and there are sort of conclusions reached throughout the document. And so they can be quite tricky to read, but we are going to have a look into it and see what we can get. Now, before getting into it, I want to emphasize that I am not a religious scholar. I am not a church scholar, but I have in fact read the declaration, so perhaps that gives me somewhat of a basis on which I can talk you through it. So firstly, in the first couple of paragraphs, the declaration makes very clear that what constitutes marriage is the exclusive, stable, and indissoluble union between a woman and a man, naturally open to the generation of children. So their definition of marriage has not changed at all. But I want to make 2 points that I think will draw out what this declaration is actually getting to in regarding blessings, particularly of same-sex couples. So firstly, there's a question of what is being blessed. And there's a distinction here that needs to be made between a blessing of a relationship and a blessing of people. So similarly, the declaration very early on says the church does not have the power to impart blessings on unions of persons of the same sex. So a blessing of the union between a same-sex couple is obviously still not allowed and still not part of church teaching. However, blessings of people is allowed. The declaration makes clear God never turns away anyone who approaches him, and goes on. When people ask for a blessing, an exhaustive moral analysis should not be placed as a precondition for conferring it. For those seeking a blessing should not be required to have prior moral perfection. And that's a pretty basic aspect of church teaching. People are not perfect. People have sinned. People come to God for blessings to receive grace. So that's a very important distinction to keep in mind between a blessing of a relationship and a blessing for people. So if we were to take an example, let's say Bonnie and Clyde were not shot up by the cops in Louisiana and were instead taken to jail, taken to prison, and they were given a life sentence, perhaps a death sentence in those days. And a priest was to come into the prison, and Bonnie and Clyde came up to the priest and said, "Father, would you please bless us? Would you please give us a blessing?" I think you would be hard pressed to find a priest that would deny them in that situation a blessing. The priest would be well within his right and the right of the church to bless both the person of Bonnie and the person of Clyde. And in no way would that blessing be a blessing of the nature of their relationships, having murdered and stolen. And it definitely wouldn't be a blessing upon the past actions that the two have gotten into. So in a similar way, the church views homosexuality, the act of homosexuality, as a sin. But if a same-sex couple was to come to a priest and ask for a blessing, the priest would be very able to offer a blessing to those two people. Now, the second thing that we want to look at that the declaration goes into, which I think will help our understanding, is that it makes a clear distinction between liturgical blessings or pastoral blessings. So liturgical blessings are the more structured, sacramental aspects of the church and the blessings that it provides in those scenarios. So you have baptism, marriage, of course, reconciliation, confirmation, first communion. And these sacraments and the blessings that come through these sacraments are in a very ritualized and formal way. And very often the people that are doing them, well, and actually all scenarios where the people that are doing them, they have to go through some sort of preparation. So for baptism, for example, the mother and father would go to the priest and have to have a session with the priest before the baptism is given. For marriage, similarly, the couple would come to the priest and they would go through a few sessions before the marriage would be able to occur. And there's also very strict provisions around what is to be said during such blessings and ceremonies and the ritualized aspect to them. So those are liturgical blessings, which are more structured. On the other hand, and something that this declaration really goes into, and I think it's really the point of the declaration in its entirety, is to go into further the idea of these pastoral blessings. So, to quote the declaration, in order to help us understand the value of a more pastoral approach to blessings, Pope Francis urges us to contemplate with an attitude of faith and fatherly mercy the fact that when one asks for a blessing, one is expressing a petition for God's assistance, a plea to live better, and confidence in a Father who can help us live better. It then goes on, when considered outside of a liturgical framework, these expressions of faith are found in a realm of greater spontaneity and freedom. So these pastoral blessings are giving priests a level of flexibility and freedom to offer blessings outside of these more structured scenarios. So it does give a few examples of people who are on pilgrimages or in a meeting with a priest or visiting a shrine or in a prayer group that allow for blessings to be conferred. And I think there's one paragraph that makes this quite clear. It says at paragraph 38, for this reason, one should neither provide for nor promote a ritual, i.e. a structured format, for the blessing of couples in an irregular situation. At the same time, one should not prevent or prohibit the church's closeness to people in every situation in which they might seek God's help through a simple blessing. So I think that's making quite clear that priests need a level of freedom to be able to offer blessings to all those that come to them. And they don't want to go through, as we quoted earlier, an exhaustive moral analysis of the people on whom their blessings are conferred. So I think looking at those two things, looking at the difference between a blessing for a person and a blessing for a relationship, and also looking at the very structured and liturgical blessings that the church provides, and also the more ad hoc and pastoral blessings that the church provides, it really helps us understand what this declaration is getting to. So I think there is a lot of noise. I think people are reading into the declaration what they want to, but there is a pretty clear message throughout the declaration that priests should be there to administer to people and to bring God's grace to them. And no one should be denied that grace for any of their past wrongdoings. So if you've got the time, I'd recommend going and reading the declaration. It's not too long. And I'd also recommend going beyond just the mere headlines of the New York Times and Reuters, going into the article and seeing what is actually being said. And if you do have time, to go back to the primary source. So I hope that's been somewhat clarifying. If you've liked this video, please like and subscribe. If you're listening on the podcast, please follow, give us a like as well. For those regular listeners of mine, this is going to be our last episode for the year. We'll be back early in the new year with some more exciting content, but I will continue to post over on Instagram and on Twitter. So if you want to keep in touch, head over there. But also have a great Christmas. Enjoy the holidays. Spend some time with your loved ones. And in light of the declaration, God bless you all. Have a great couple of weeks. And I'll see you all in the new year.